kind of has a deeper meaning. It's not so much just a baseball movie, you know, like a lot of other ones. I think that's why.
Maybe it's about belief. You know, if you believe in something, even when nobody else believes it.
It reaches so many people. I think it just leaves an imprint on you, and it's, you know, to this day, it's my favorite movie.
I've never sat up an entire night and finished a book in one sitting. I mean, it was morning when I finished reading this book, Shoeless Joe, and literally couldn't put it down.
To us, it was a double mission. One, because the script was so good and the project was such a feel-good project, but also because of our desire to have a catch with our father if we possibly could.
John Spade. Mark it. Mark it. Stand by. And action.
We lost our father suddenly. Chuck was very young, 16. He died before he saw any of my success. He never met our families. We had a very special feeling about the subject matter. We took it out on the street and went to every studio and thrown out of every office 2 or 3 times.
We just kept pounding away, determined to get it made. You know, when you work from passion like that, it makes it easier in a sense. It's almost funny. It becomes easier because you don't care if you're told no 500 times, you're going to go back for the 501st time.
I think it was very risky, certainly risky for the studio, because you can't point to another movie like this that was successful. In fact, you can't point to another movie like it.
Hey, are you really hearing voices?
Just one.
What did it say?
If you build it, he will come.
Chuck and Larry and I sat down with Margie Simpkin, who's our casting director, and we came up with a list of actors that we wanted to send it to. At the very beginning, we said, what about Kevin? And someone said, well, you know, he just did a baseball movie. He just did Bull Durham. It's coming out in a few months, so he's clearly not going to want to do another one.
I guess this is my sequel to Baseballs.
So we all thought, oh, that's too bad. And we came up with a list of other actors. He was not on our list because we just assumed he'd say no.
Believe me, everybody representing him was telling him not to do it because it would be 2 baseball pictures in a row. But he understood it was more than a baseball picture. And he also had a commitment to do another movie, which he pushed back in order to do this film. He showed tremendous belief and guts to take the role.
He just said, I'm in, you know, I want to do this. And I don't care what everybody around me says. This is something, this is why I'm in this business, is to do things that I care about, and I care about this.
This is so bitchin'.
I don't believe I'm doing this. I came home one day, and my wife said, I just read a script they sent you. You must do it. There's a long speech about baseball that will not be in the movie because it's too long. And I read it, and I said, yeah, I'd like to do it very much. But because Phil Allen Robinson both wrote it and directed it, the long speech was left in.
On page 1, it was like some fairy dust jumped off page 1, and every page was magical in the script. And you knew at that point that it was a magical piece of property.
I was brought in like everybody else was. Here's this great script. And it's Kevin doing it, who was pretty well known by that time. I didn't know anything about Phil Robinson. I knew a lot about baseball, but they saw, you know, most of the women that were in the business during that time, and I went in and read the scene of telling the people at the high school not to censor books, and basically did that scene and met Kevin, and left and was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get this, you know, because I really wanted to, and there were many other people up for it. And I came back again and met the Gordons, and then they said, do you want to do it?
I heard that Kevin was doing it, who I started out with and who I liked, and James Earl Jones and Burt Lancaster. And I said, well, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. But they came to me, and it somehow just worked out. It was one of those movies that fell in my lap. What I liked about it was the book is called Shoeless Joe, so the movie then was going to be called Shoeless Joe. I said, oh, good. I'm the title character.
By the time we were shooting, I think pretty much everybody had read the book, Shoeless Joe. And I felt this enormous responsibility to Bill Kinsella and his beautiful book, and to the fans of the book, of which I'm one. And I think everybody was just infused with this spirit of we had a chance to do something very special.
Everybody was doing the project for the right reason. And from the first day we got there, again, you know, the townspeople were just great. And it was such a positive feeling from day one from everybody.
The community was unbelievably great, and we're really excited for us to be there.
And what a great part of America, Iowa. I'd walk into a Sears and Roebuck store looking for some fishing tackle, and 3 clerks would come up to me. They didn't know who the hell I was, so it wasn't because I was an actor or with that movie that's shooting down over in Dyersville. They did that with all the customers. And I'm talking about courtesy now, just common courtesy that we all depend on, common decency.
I remember we were there on the 4th of July, and they had this incredible barbecue and took us out on the river to see fireworks. The sunsets at the farm were phenomenal every night.
The sun would go down on that field. The ball field lights would be on, and there was something so beautiful about that field at twilight.
To me, it was just gorgeous. I remember there were some nights that we had to stop because there were these silent lightning storms, and Phil Alden Robinson, the director, I think he kind of liked when they came along, so we were forced to take a break, and we just all sat up at the house outside on the porch, and we just sat and watched the lightning, and you looked down and you could see the lightning lighting up the cornfields, and it was just such a surreal, different feeling, from a kid from Jersey.
When we were working nights, and we did a lot of night shooting, it's pre-dawn, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and you drive back to Dubuque, and it was so beautiful. It was so peaceful and quiet, and there'd be a ground mist sort of hanging there, and the light was gorgeous, and nobody was up, nobody was on the road. It was really idyllic.
Hey! Is this heaven? No. It's Iowa.
One of the reasons that Is This Heaven, no, it's Iowa, it has such an impact. It is so simple. The line is simple, the dialogue is simple, the idea is simple. And it hits me like a ton of bricks every time I hear it.
Well, it's interesting because I can't tell you how many people have called up and said, you know the scene where, Kevin goes out on the field in that fog, who was your special effects guy? And it's one of those magical things about the movie. It just came that night, boom, showed up. It was, meant to be.
Oh, shit,
Kevin said to me early on, he says, there'll be days on the set when I won't have a clue what to do, and I'm going to really need you to tell me. And he said, there will also be days on the set when you're not going to have a clue what to do, and I just want you to know that I'll be there for you.
The only time I ever saw Kevin upset the entire shooting of the film, and I was out there a lot, was when he wanted to work longer, and Phil said, we're done for the day. And it was the only time I saw Kevin get upset. He wanted to keep shooting, and you never see that. You never see that.
It's interesting. Kevin always, we'd get a take that we really liked, and I'd say, great, print, check the gate. And he'd say, let me do one more.
Am I in this, Liz?
Oh, sure.
Can we do one more?
I'd say, okay. So we'd do another one, and I'd say, that was really good too. I said, I'm ready to move on. He'd say, okay. And now, I'm behind schedule. The clock is ticking. The sun's going down. I got to move, and I want to get to the next setup. And Kevin would grab me and say, you know what I liked about that? And he'd want to talk about that take. And at first, it just drove me crazy. It was like, Kevin, I got to go. And then I realized you work for hours bumbling through a scene till you finally get a take right, where everything is right, where the camera works right, the light is right, the actors are right, the background is right. There's a moment where it feels good after a couple of hours of being frustrated. He wanted to stay in that moment another couple of seconds. He wanted to just feel good before we started feeling bad about the next scene that we didn't quite know how to do.
I met Brooks Robinson, and they had a celebrity game, and he was talking to some people, and he said, I was rounding third, and this actor threw me out at home plate. I couldn't believe it. He said, this guy, Kevin Costner. I don't ever tell Costner you said that. His head will be this big. But he said, that guy's got an arm.
Yeah, he's good athlete.
Pretty good compliment.
Kevin is a spectacular ball player. Kevin's really good. And when we were shooting at Fenway Park, the groundskeeper let Kevin take batting practice, and he hit the green monster.
the hell are you?
Sir, my name's Ray Kinsella.
I was very intimidated first meeting James Earl Jones, and then I realized that that was totally not who this guy was.
He was magnificent in the film and could not be a nicer person to work with.
He was just the nicest guy in the world. And like I said, this was only my third movie, and he was just so generous and kind, and he was just great to talk to. Really, really was.
I thought, when we get to the big speech out on the ball field, America has rolled by like an army of steamrollers, he'll really preach that, you know. We get to that day, it's another one of these days where actors who weren't working that day show up to watch. And he said to me, now, Phil, I don't want to preach this. I just want to say the words. And inside, I'm dying. I thought, no, I've been waiting all summer to hear him just go to town on the speech. And I said, okay, let's do it. And he trusted the text, and he trusted his own instrument, and it was beautiful. He did it just beautifully, just beautifully.
The one constant through all the years, Ray, has been baseball. America has rolled by like an army of steamrollers. It's been erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again. But baseball has marked the time.
So we printed that, we moved on. The next day, we did the reverse angle, which is the reaction shots of Kevin and Amy and everybody listening to him. And James Earl came that day. He wasn't going to be on camera, but he came that day to stand off camera and deliver the lines. And he said to me, would it be okay with you if I preached it this time? He said, I kind of feel bad I didn't get to do it yesterday. I'd just like to just once really let it go. I said, yeah. And it was unbelievable. And I at one point I looked, and 50 yards away, crew guys who were like in the parking lot were standing stock still with their mouths open listening to this. He just filled up the Iowa sky with his voice and his words, and the words just kind of echoed away into the air, and it was a gift that we had for a moment, and then it was gone. But we got great reaction shots.
Daddy?
In a minute, Karen.
There's a man out there on your lawn.
I love the first time that Ray meets Shoeless Joe. I just love that whole sequence.
You look up and he's there. You can just feel the audience, you know. There's a validity to what he's been doing.
Kevin, knowing that there's something out there that he can't understand, but he's got to go out there. And he's not afraid, but he's afraid of saying the wrong thing. He's afraid of doing the wrong thing. And I love how he plays that, and I love how Ray Liotta plays it. He's a guy who's been denied this, the feel of the grass and the wearing of the glove for decades. And he just wants to be out there and play again.
We had actually worked with Ray on a TV series years ago, and we're just a big fan of his. I mean, you know, he's a terrific actor. He gets very involved, does a tremendous amount of research for all his roles. And just looking for something that wasn't the obvious.
See if you can hit my curve. Oh. Yeah, you can hit the curveball.
Yeah, you can hit the curve. And he almost takes him out. It just happened. I wish I could say it was planned. It wasn't. It just happened, but a great moment.
What happened literally was Shoeless Joe batted left-handed and threw right-handed. I throw left-handed and bat right-handed. And for like weeks, for a month, I was batting left-handed and throwing right-handed. And Rod Dado, who was the coach of USC, who won like 14 national champions, he was like my coach. And Donnie Buford, who played for the Baltimore Orioles, was my coach. So one day, the director came down to see how I was doing, and I could see them mumbling and saying stuff and looking over. And they said, well, why don't you, do you mind, it doesn't matter if it was historically accurate. So they made me go right-handed and left-handed. And to this day, I regret it, and I'm a bug about making sure that things are accurate if it's real or people would know about it. And I'll never forget, there used to be Monday Night Baseball, and they were talking about the movie and how much, how wonderful the movie was and how much it moved them. But some announcer that'll name nameless, yeah, but Shoeless Joe was batting the wrong way. Well, he didn't come down from heaven either, so.
maybe what the movie does is it says, you know what? This guy loved to play the game more than anything else. This was what was most important to Joe Jackson. He wasn't a thug. He wasn't a really bad guy the way some people might remember him from the history books. For him, it was all about playing the game, and he had that taken away from him. Well, you know what? He had Major League Baseball taken away from him, and that's what I liked about the movie, that what he loved was baseball. Not necessarily Major League Baseball and the uniforms and the logos and the franchises, but to go out there and play.
Okay, thank you, guys. Okay, let's try that, please.
There were days when I was an idiot. I just didn't have a clue what the scene was about, how to do it. We had one day when I just shut the thing down for a couple of hours. We were out in 100-degree plus sunshine doing the scene where Shoeless Joe asks James Earl, do you want to come with us? And Ray thinks he means him. So come with you. And he goes, no, not you, him. It so wasn't working. This scene was dead on arrival. It was like nobody was good in the scene. And here you've got Kevin Costner, Ray Liotta, and James Earl Jones. If they're not good, it's not their fault. There's something wrong with the script or the director, but it can't, all three of them can't be wrong. And I realized I didn't know how to fix the scene. There was something wrong with it, and I was hot, and I was tired, and I was frustrated, and I said, everybody just take a break. And I walked up to my trailer, which was air-conditioned, and I had a nice bottle of cold water, and I sat there with a yellow pad and a pen, and I started making notes on the scene. And at one point, Kevin came in the trailer. He says, do you mind if I come in? I said, no, come on, here's what I'm thinking about. And he said, oh, what if we did this? I said, yeah, well, maybe we do this. And the two of us are now rewriting the scene. And I said, hey, let's call James Earl in. So the James Earl came and joined us. And we worked it out. I knew that we couldn't have worked it out in the hot sun. We were all just too frustrated. We sat in the trailer, it was nice. Unbeknownst to me, there are phone calls flying to LA and back. You know, my God, Phil, shut the film down, you know, what's he doing? And we went out and shot the scene that exists in the film now, which was 100 times better than what we were doing before. I've gone back and looked at the original script. It's only a few words different, but they made all the difference. And I remember walking onto the set with Kevin from the trailer, and Kevin said to me, I'm always going to remember this day. This is the day when, you know, Phil and I sat down and we fixed the scene. And I shared that sense of, yeah, it just feels so good to finally get it right, you know. I always remember that.
And there were times when children could not afford eyeglasses or milk or clothing. Yet no child was ever denied these essentials, because in the background there was always Dr. Graham. Without any fanfare or publicity, the glasses or the milk or the ticket to the ball game found their way into the child's pocket.
And that was the real obituary that Vita Ponigvar in the Chisholm newspaper had written for Doc Graham. And I love James Earl going and interviewing people in the bar. He's a writer. He's going to go back to his roots.
What else?
He always wore an overcoat. He had white hair. And he always carried an umbrella.
And those are all real stories about the real Doc Graham. But always carried an umbrella and always bought these blue hats for his wife. It's actually what Bill Kinsella did when he decided he wanted to write about this guy whose nickname he saw in the baseball encyclopedia, Moonlight Graham. Played one inning, no at-bats. And Bill said, I want to write about this guy. And he and his wife drove to Chisholm, Minnesota, and they interviewed people, find out about the real Doc Graham. I just love that. I also just, it always tickles me to think that Doc Graham was a man, he passed away in 65. Clearly, he had been to the movies. Maybe he saw Birdman of Alcatraz, Burt Lancaster, never dreaming that as he sat in that theater that someday that movie star is going to play me in a movie.
Are you Moonlight Graham?
No one's called me Moonlight Graham in 50 years.
I wanted a movie star from an earlier era because I felt that, in a way, Doc Graham was a movie star to the people in his town. He was the person in that town that everybody looked up to, and decades later are still telling stories about. But it had to be a movie star who could believably portray a man who in his youth was an athlete, and that's Burt.
I've always been a big Burt Lancaster fan, and it was the last film he did before he passed away. So I didn't have too much work to do with Mr. Lancaster, but just kind of being around him and meeting him. That was pretty cool. And, you know, there are a few people in your life that you really look up to. So that was really nice.
And he was just right there. He was just locked in, did it, and it was time to move on. And just that professionalism, just to watch somebody who's been around for so long just be so professional and just do it was great, aside from the fact that, it is a living legend that I was working with, and so it was pretty exciting.
I'd worked with Burt in very piddling ways earlier. For instance, we were both members of the original cast of Sesame Street. He did the numbers and I did the alphabet, or vice versa. And we worked on a Christmas show once. It's a variety show. And I knew I loved him.
The first day he was on the set, everybody was calling him Mr. Lancaster.
I'll get it for you, sir.
And a couple of the guys in the crew came over to me and they said, Phil, if you'll just call him Bert out loud in front of everybody, then we can call him Bert. And I said, I'm not going to call him Bert. I was just as scared of him as they were. And finally, it was the camera operator, Ken Ferris, who's sitting behind a big hunk of metal, so he was sort of protected. And he said, hey, Bert, could you just stand over here? And he said, oh, sure. And then we said, hey, Bert, nice to see you. Hey, Bert, you want some coffee? Hey, Bert, let me take your coat for you. From that point on, everybody was calling him Bert.
It's the only time I think in my entire career I was a little intimidated. I even went up to him one day and I said, Mr. Lancaster, I know producers aren't supposed to do this, but can you and I take a picture together? And he goes, sure, kid. And he grabs me. And in the picture, you see me like wincing because he's like squeezing my shoulder. But, I wouldn't dare say a thing to him.
We were rehearsing the scene in which Burt Lancaster comes over to save the little girl who's just fallen off the bleachers. And we're just blocking the scene. I said, why don't you stand over here? And Burt, you'll come over this way. And he comes over and he's standing there and he looks at Tim Busfield, who's standing sort of on the edge of this little area. And he says, I'd like some water. Tim, who's the nicest guy in the world, goes, yes, sir. And he rushes off, comes back with some water for Burt. And I'm talking to Kevin about, I think you'll bend down over here to kneel next to her. And Burt says to Tim, get my chair, please.
Burt thought he was a gopher. And he just kept saying to him, kid, get my chair. And Timothy, also intimidated, would go get the chair, bring it back, put it there. And this went on for 2 days. He was there 2 days early before Timothy was supposed to work. And finally, there comes the moment they work together in a scene. And Burt looks at him and he says, what the hell are you doing here? And he said, well, Mr. Lancaster, I've been trying to tell you for 2 days now. I'm an actor. I'm playing the role of so-and-so. And he says, fine, get my chair. And that was him,
Yeah, Burt. He is an old school guy. He would show up on the set, head to toe wool, 100 degrees outside, 105. And he'd be dressed for first rehearsal. He showed up while I was shooting one of the more volatile, intense parts of the scene on the bleachers where Kevin and I are exchanging words, and they cut, and they were moving the camera around, and I went over to him, and he said, you're playing the bad guy. I said, I like you out there making faces. You're good at it, making faces. He said, you're the bad guy. I said, yeah. He said, I played the bad guy, Vera Cruz. Stole the picture. I mean, I got him talking. We just spent days. I'd hunker up next to him in a chair on the set under an umbrella, and we would talk. I had a great, great time with him.
He's doing his speech in the doctor's office. He's talking about, he'd love to stand up and face a major league pitcher, and stretch a double into a triple. And it's a long speech, and he had a hard time getting through the whole thing. His memory was not as good as it had been as a young man. It was pretty good. He finally got a take where he not only got the words all right, but he got the emotion just perfect. And I'm standing next to the camera, as I have 1,000 times before and since, and I had chills. And it's never happened to me. He nailed that moment so well that when it was over, I could barely say cut. I was so moved by it. And I really felt like I was in the presence of a legend, which of course we all were.
To feel the tingle in your arm as you connect with the ball. Then run the bases, stretch a double into a triple, and flop face first into third. Wrap your arms around the bag. That's my wish, Rick and Silla. That's my wish.
That's the take that's in the movie, yeah.
This was a man, a giant movie star, a giant presence at the end of his career and close to the end of his life. And I think that's why it was such an important role and such a great performance, that he was able to really feel what he was saying. And we were lucky.
You were good.
Dad? You want to have a catch? I'd like that.
I think my favorite scene is when he realized his dad was on the field.
The best part of that movie to me was probably when he got to play catch with his father, and that's probably pretty cool.
And Kevin Costner says, hey, Dad, you want to have a catch? His dad says, yeah, I'd like that.
When we shot that scene, there was so much emotion on the set that day. It was unlike any other day when we shot the Kevin and his father, Kevin and Dwier Brown saying goodbye and having the catch. The crew was quiet. The cast was very quiet. There was no kidding around going on. And the two of them had so much emotion inside them, not just as actors, but as people. And I never asked them what was going on. You just trust the fact. It was there.
My father died the month before we shot Field of Dreams, and it was a sudden thing. I was called back from LA to be with him. I got there that day, and he died that night. Fortunately, he had been, very lucid, and we got to talk about a bunch of things and his frustrations in his life, and the man he wanted to be that he felt like he never could be. And again, I felt like I was, being the father and telling him that, he'd just been the greatest dad to me, and that even if he hadn't succeeded in the world, in his work, the way he had hoped to, that he had been a great success to me and to my brother and my sister. And I hope that was as meaningful for him as it was for me. When we went off to shoot the movie, I think I left from where we had the funeral to go to Iowa to shoot. And to me, that whole thing of him dying was too fresh in my mind for me to use it very much, in the course of the shooting of the thing. But again, that idea of sort of having this second chance, if you could, have just another opportunity to talk and set everything straight in some kind of idyllic, heavenly environment, I think, I was really lucky to have that opportunity.
He wished he hadn't said those awful things to his dad. And the only way around it wasn't to actually address that issue, but to just have a catch. Might actually, it's one of those things you can do. You throw the ball back and forth. It's pretty universal.
Well, it's as close to a simple redemption as you can have, he didn't cause his father's death. He just said no to his father. I don't want to play catch. I don't want anything to do with you. Now he does. Now he's ready to play catch, probably because he has a child of his own, I guess.
I think the scene it's either the truth for your family relationship that you as a child played catch with your dad, and it's a very private moment and what that was like, or you had the antithesis of that. There was no way you were even going to be able to even think about playing catch with your dad, or your dad wasn't around, or you didn't have a dad, and it's a hope. It's a fantasy. It's wish fulfillment that you could actually have that and be that close. So, what either end of the spectrum you're at, or if you're kind of shades of gray in the middle, it just works for you.
I think the baseball aspect has, some part in it, but I think most of it is that whole emotional bond with a parent, whether it's father, mother, whatever. I think that's the key.
Well, giving you our experience, our personal experience with our father, losing our father suddenly without warning, and believe me, there were a lot of things left unsaid. I was the oldest, especially between he and I. I'd give anything to have that opportunity to say those things. And I think that moment is just it's a miracle. It's something in your life, everybody's life who's reached maturity has someone in their life who's not around anymore. Doesn't necessarily mean they've died, but they're not around. And you'd like to see them again.
Yeah, out of the thousands and thousands of letters we got, there are more saying, I haven't, spoken to my father in 15 years, and we saw your movie and went out and had a catch. It's, amazing.
It's one of the great coming of age experiences between American boys and their fathers. And, you know, when you think of having a catch, you think of a warm summer evening, you think of, you know, the family having a good time, you just have such good memories of that. The first time your dad takes you to a baseball game, you know, you never forget that. One day on the set, James Earl Jones was explaining to his son, Flynn, about the last scene in the movie. And he said to Flynn, well, watch just physically what they're doing. It's, I give to you, I get from you, I give back to you. That's what playing catch is.
We would take that opportunity to talk to each other, and it was something that was between us.
I mean, if you ever had a son, or as a young man, you ever played ball, there's a good chance if your dad was there, you played ball with your dad. You know, I play catch with my son right now. He's 5 years old. I can remember playing catch with my dad in the backyard, you know, or my dad throwing to me. That's why when the guys' fathers come around here, I invite them to come to the clubhouse. To come on in, Pops, because I invite my dad to come in. So that's why that scene was, not just my opinion, why it was so special, I think.
You know, it's almost a thing like if you had 500 days in the backyard with your dad playing catch, you'd want 501. And same thing with my son growing up. If I had 500 days in the backyard with him playing catch, yeah, I'd want 501. And you know, there's only a certain amount of time when that window's there, when they're young and they can do it, or when I was young playing with my dad. And so no regrets, but definitely, you know, you still long for one more day of doing that.
Unfortunately, life's not a movie, and you don't get a second chance. I think that's what, you know, we loved about this movie so much. But yeah, there are things I think, you know, I have 3 daughters, and I try to, you know, let them know each day how I feel about them. I don't want to take that chance again.
Since my dad passed away, I'd like to play catch with him again. And it's one of those things that I would love a second chance to do that.
You know, if you could somehow do that again, you know, it's worth anything in the world.
Well, I'd like some first chances. With my father, for instance, I never got to know him. You know, he lives down the road here. I never got to know him, and that's okay too. It wasn't meant to be.
Chuck sent me a rough cut on tape. I was in New York, so I threw in the tape, and by the time it was over, 2 of us sitting in a room, both of us blown away and tears. I called him and said, my gosh, this is amazing. I was choking up on the phone. We were, you know, having a moment here.
After the movie came out, Phil and Larry and Chuck, the producers, used to go down to Westwood. They would have the schedule of the movies, and they would go in for the last 5 minutes of the movie, just walk into the back of the theater and stand there and watch how, when the movie was over and the credits ran, that all these men would still be in their seats in the theater, waiting until they could pull themselves together before they could leave, you know?
I know around the time when it came out, a lot of people told me since, it said, you know, how much it meant to them, and that after they saw it, or they called their father or their son or someone that was close to them. It just moves you to, I guess, to keep in touch and to stay close to the people that you love.
Of all the films that I have been involved with, this is the one film that no matter where I am, people always come up to me, and men always come up to me. So I think it was a film, and not intended that way, that men have really related to on an emotional level.
It goes on and on. Athletes all over the place have talked to us about it, and I read that this was Joe DiMaggio's favorite movie. I know that President Clinton and President Bush are huge fans of the film. I can't figure out why we didn't win the Academy Award, because
don't get me started.
Movie. Something happened.
Yeah.
It was just such a great experience. I had this, you know, 3-minute brush with fame in the same way that Moonlight Graham had his little brush with fame. And he says, and I feel the same way, that having the movie in my life was a great thing, you know, and it's, you know, just in the same way that having a brush in the major leagues was a great thing. But if he hadn't become a doctor, or if I hadn't become a father, that to me would really have been a tragedy, because I've gotten so much joy out of my children. You know, it's just made my life complete.
If they had baseball cards for actors, I'd have a nice baseball card. That would be a nice championship season. And what makes a classic is time. Looking back on it now, 20 years later, 15 years later, I feel very fortunate.
That's what I remember when I think about the making of that film. You know, being 23 years old and in a baseball outfit and sitting out there and watching his son go down, and anything was possible.
It was just really an incredible experience. I'm friends with Kevin and Phil and James and Tim, I mean, to this day, and that doesn't usually happen, so that's pretty nice.
I just feel lucky. I feel lucky to have been able to take this amazing book and be part of making the movie. It would have been so easy for it not to happen, or for it to happen without me. And I just think that's one of those, as a friend of mine calls it, a field of dreams moment.
You make movies and they do well at the box office, that's one thing. And then on top of that, to get the kind of recognition it has and have people call you and tell you how it's changed their lives, and you see, you read books about the field and the millions of people that come there, and it's just icing on the cake. It's phenomenal. You wish you could make that every time out.
We keep looking for it, but I don't know. I'm getting a little low. I'm not sure we'll find this again.
This is a Terrence Mann monologue, James Earl Jones. It says, people will come, Ray. They'll come to Iowa for reasons they can't even fathom.
They'll turn into the driveway, not knowing for sure why they're doing it. They'll arrive at your door as innocent as children, longing for the past.
Of course we won't mind if you have a look around, you'll say. It's only $20 per person. They'll pass over the money without even thinking about it, for it is money they have and peace they lack.
And they'll walk out to the bleachers, sit in shirt sleeves on a perfect afternoon.
And they'll find they have reserved seats somewhere along one of the baselines where they sat when they were children and cheered their heroes.
And they'll watch the game, and it'll be as if they had dipped themselves in magic waters.
The memories will be so thick they'll have to brush them away from their faces. People will come, Ray.
And then this is my favorite part when he says, the one constant through all the years, Ray, has been baseball. America has rolled by like an army of steamrollers. It has been erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again.
But baseball has marked the time. This field, this game, is a part of our past, Ray. It reminds us of all that once was good, and it could be again.
Oh, people will come, Ray. People will most definitely come. How's that?
You got another career, my friend. You got another career.